His hands were firm on my waist as his heavy breathing made my entire body shudder. Pressed against the wall of the office in Chicago, I felt the urgency of every touch, every movement that took away the control I was so proud of maintaining. "This is insanity," I whispered, but my voice came out hesitant, full of desire. "Then make me stop," he replied, his mouth touching my neck while his hands roamed my back. I couldn't resist. I didn't want to. When he slid his fingers under the button of my skirt, I felt my body give in completely. "You have no idea what you're doing to me," I said, my voice choked with longing. "I know exactly what I'm doing, and you're loving it," he said. "My name is Julia, and my life was meticulously planned." A manager in a multinational corporation at the age of 39, I was known for my efficiency, determination, and, above all, for never losing my composure. At least that's what everyone believed, but no one knew the whole story. No one knew the price I had paid to get where I was, or the choices I had made to put up this facade of an invincible woman. I kept my emotions under lock and key, away from anyone who tried to get close. That was why he became a problem from the start. Jake arrived at the office as an intern and quickly caught everyone's attention. He was young, no older than 24, but he had a presence that commanded the room. Tall, confident, and incredibly attractive, he was the kind of person who was acutely aware of the impact he had on others. I had always considered myself immune to such things. I had always been pragmatic, focused, and never allowed distractions to distract me from what really mattered. But with Jake, things were different. At first, he seemed like just another new face on the team, someone ambitious and eager to move up, but with nothing that really set him apart. It was in the first meeting he attended that I began to realize there was something more. "Excuse me, Ms. Julia," he said, raising his hand before offering an idea that completely dismantled the entire team's proposal. The room fell silent for a moment. It wasn't often that someone would directly question a suggestion of mine. But instead of irritating me, something about his calm, confident tone made me pay attention. "Intriguing, Jake," I replied in my most professional voice. "We'll explore that later." But deep down, I knew he was right. Over time, I began to notice other things. How he always knew exactly what to say, how he seemed to understand the dynamics of the company better than any intern should, and most of all, how he always seemed to be around, in the elevator, in the cafeteria, in the hallways. He never overstepped the bounds of formality, but there was something in the glances we exchanged, in the way he said my name, that made it clear that we were more than just boss and subordinate. One night, while I was working late, he showed up at my office door. "Are you still here?" I asked, still staring at my computer. "I thought you might need some assistance," he replied. I looked up and met his gaze. For a moment, the air felt thicker, and it took all my willpower to look away. "I can handle this on my own, Jake," I said, but my voice wasn't as steady as I wanted it to be, and he could tell. "Only if you let me help," he said, before he left. His audacity took me by surprise, but before I could respond, he had already moved closer. His touch was firm but respectful, as if he were waiting for my permission to continue. "Jake, this has to stop," I tried to say, but the words were lost. Instead, my breathing became heavy and my body reacted, forgetting who I was and what was at stake. When he slid his fingers inside me, it was like a wave of sensation washed over me, leaving me defenseless. "Go harder, Jake," I said, my voice almost pleading, as my hands gripped his shoulders. He complied, gripping my waist tightly as his movements became faster, more intense. Each thrust made me lose track of where we were, who I was, and what was at stake. "You have no idea what you're doing to me," I whispered, as he continued, steady and controlled, but with a burning desire. "I do, and you love it," he whispered, as the apex of pleasure enveloped us. When we finally climaxed, the pleasure washed over me in an overwhelming way, leaving my body shaking against his. Afterwards, as Jake got ready, he gave me a look of satisfaction, but there was something different in his eyes. "That doesn't change anything, Julia," he said. "What do you mean?" I asked, confused. He hesitated for a moment, but then stepped back, picking up the coat he'd left on the chair. "You'll find out soon enough," and before I could answer, he'd walked out, leaving me alone in the office with my head spinning and my heart heavy. The room felt suffocating after he'd left. I tried to gather my thoughts, but all I could feel was a mix of adrenaline, pleasure, and a growing unease. What did he mean by, "You'll find out soon enough"? I spent the night awake, tossing and turning as 1,000 scenarios ran through my mind. It wasn't just the weight of what had happened between us. It was something deeper, something that sent a chill down my spine. The next morning, I arrived at the office earlier than usual. I needed to pull myself together, to regain the authority that I felt was slipping away. Jake hadn't arrived yet, and that gave me time to rebuild my facade, but the calm was short-lived. Around 10, I received a text on my cell phone. It was from an unknown number. "You know this could ruin your career, right?" I froze, reading and rereading the words. Who had sent this? How did they know? I looked around, trying to spot anything suspicious, but the office seemed to be operating normally. Jake was at his desk, focused on a stack of reports, as if nothing had happened. I took a deep breath and deleted the message. Maybe it was just a coincidence or some kind of unfounded threat, but something in me knew it wasn't that simple. That afternoon, an envelope arrived on my desk. It had no return address, just my handwritten name. When I opened it, I found a single sheet of paper with a photo pinned to it. It was a picture of me and Jake in the conference room the night before. It wasn't explicit, but it was enough to hint that there was something between us. Below the photo, a sentence was written in capital letters. "A secret doesn't stay hidden forever." My heart raced. Who could have taken that photo, and what did they want from me? In that moment, I realized that I was in the middle of something much bigger than I had imagined. Jake could be an important player in this game, but who else was involved, and what did they want from me? I needed to find out the truth before everything fell apart. Holding that photo, I felt a shiver run through my body. My first instinct was to look for Jake, but I knew I couldn't confront him directly if he was part of this. I would need more information before I revealed that I knew about the photo. I spent the afternoon trying to act normal, but every minute felt like an eternity. My gaze drifted to the envelope hidden in the drawer, and the sentence written on it echoed in my mind. "A secret doesn't stay hidden forever." At 5 p.m., I received another message on my cell phone. "Conference room empty. 6 p.m., come alone." The number was unfamiliar again. I could ignore it, pretend I didn't see it, but something inside me knew I had to go. It was the only way I could understand what was happening. At 6 p.m. sharp, I entered the conference room. It was empty, as promised. The lights were off and the silence was oppressive. I took a few steps inside, trying to control my breathing. "I knew you would come," the voice suddenly rang out, making me turn toward it. It was Emily, one of the company's directors. I could hardly believe it. "You, Emily," she smiled, crossing her arms, surprised. "What do you want, Emily?" I asked, confused. "I want what I've always wanted, Julia." "Transparency," she said. I was perplexed. Transparency. What was she talking about? "I don't know what you're talking about," I replied, trying to remain calm. "Oh, yes you do. You know exactly what you did to get where you are. The deals, the manipulations. You think people forget, but they don't, Julia." My stomach turned. Emily knew. She knew the secrets I'd kept buried for years, secrets I thought would never see the light of day again. And Jake, is he involved in this? I asked, trying to maintain my composure. She laughed. Jake is just a cog, Julia. A useful cog, but easily replaceable. He doesn't know anything. He just happened to be in the right place at the right time. And the picture? You took it, of course you did. You're so predictable. It was easy to manipulate you into falling exactly where I wanted you to. My mind raced, trying to find a way out. Emily had me cornered. But I knew she wanted more than revenge. So what do you want? I asked. I want you to resign. Tomorrow morning, you're going to walk into the boardroom and tell everyone you can't continue with the company, she said, her smile almost triumphant. And if I don't? I asked, feeling the tension building. She leaned forward, the smile fading from her face. Then this picture will end up in the right hands, and you know very well what that means. I walked out of the conference room with my heart pounding. Emily had put me in an impossible position, and I knew I couldn't trust Jake or anyone else in the office. But one thing was clear. I wasn't going to go down without a fight. That night, I began gathering everything I had on Emily. If she wanted to play dirty, I knew how to do that, too. And as the night wore on, I began formulating my plan. The night seemed endless. Every document, old email, and forgotten contact I reviewed was a step toward turning the tables on Emily. I knew that standing up to her would mean putting more than just my career at risk, but the alternative, giving in to her demands and abandoning everything I'd built, was simply unacceptable. The next morning, I walked into my office with my head held high. Emily was in the hallway, chatting casually with another director, and she gave me a sharp look, as if she'd already won. Jake was also nearby, but he avoided looking me directly. I sat at my desk, trying to keep my cool as I waited for the board meeting to start. My plan was still risky, but it was all I had. When I finally walked into the conference room, Emily was already there, her smile calculated. Jake was there too, which surprised me. He seemed restless, shuffling through the papers in front of him, but he kept his gaze focused. The meeting began as usual, but I soon realized that Emily was just waiting for the right moment to make her move. And then, in the middle of a discussion about a recent project, she dropped the bombshell. I think this would be a good time for Julia to make an announcement, don't you think? She asked, with an almost triumphant smile. All eyes turned to me. What announcement would that be, Emily? I asked, trying to keep my cool. She smiled almost triumphantly. Well, you know what I'm talking about. It's something everyone here deserves to know. Before she could continue, Jake interrupted. Excuse me, but I think there's something more pressing to discuss, he said, placing a flash drive on the table. Emily stared at him in surprise. What are you saying, Jake? She asked, trying to maintain her composure, but the glint in her eyes made it clear she'd been caught off guard. He stood up and plugged the flash drive into the projector. A video began to play on the screen, showing Emily in a compromising conversation with another director, discussing exactly how to manipulate information to ward off rivals. Shock filled the room. Emily tried to argue, but her position was shattered. The CEO of the company ordered her removed immediately, and she left the room without another word. When it was over, Jake approached me. I knew you needed help, he said. I stared at him, confused. You knew all of this? I asked. Not all of it, but enough to know Emily was trying to take you down, he replied, with a smile that this time seemed genuine. Why did you do this? I asked. Because you deserve to be here, Julia. And because I didn't want to be just another pawn in this game. That night, as I drove home, I finally felt relieved. Emily was out of the way, My position was secure, and most of all, I had faced it all with dignity. But as I lay down to sleep, one thought lingered. What if there were more Emmyless along the way? The answer was clear. I was prepared.